Well, grace and peace be unto you from God our Father and Lord Jesus Christ. I am Andy C. Lewter, and I am delighted to be hosting this edition of the Weekly Clergy Roundtable. As you can see on the screen, a number of our panelists have joined us today. We have a topic that we believe is going to be most engaging and informative, and we are anxious to share the contents of the same with you. However, prior to doing that, let me go around the table and afford those who are with us today the opportunity to say hello to us. So let's begin on the east end of Long Island as soon as she comes off from mute.
Is that me?
Amen. Amen.
No.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Overseer Diane Seaman. I am the pastor of Good Samaritan Ministries in Center Reach and Port Jeff, both of which are covered down in snow. And it's beautiful out here. God bless you.
Well, God bless you. And of course, the next person that I want to refer to has just reminded us that what we are experiencing now, we're right in the middle or we're in the aftermath of a rather tremendous blizzard that we have had. But our next guest reminded us that what we're experiencing is what Buffalo gets all the time. Good morning, Bishop.
Not, I'm not going to say all the time, periodically. Periodically. Grace and peace to all of my colleagues and to those who will be watching us today. God bless you. I am Bishop Jeffrey Owens of the Love Alive Fellowship Full Gospel Baptist Church here in Buffalo, New York, and I'm glad to be on this platform with my colleagues.
And we are indeed happy to have you, sir. Now, we're going to leave the East Coast and venture to the Midwest and land in the state of Iowa and the city of Waterloo. Good morning, Bishop.
Good morning, Bishop, and all my colleagues. I am so glad to be here, and I'm healing. My health is much better, and I bring you greetings from Koinonia Ministry Full Gospel Baptist Church, where I'm the under shepherd.
Happy to have you, Bishop. Thank you. And we have been praying for that concussion that you sustained a few weeks ago. We're happy to see that you're up and about and doing well. Let me say hello to my colleague, friend, son in the ministry, a person that I am most proud of. Good morning, Brother President. So delighted to see you today.
Good morning, all. I am Reverend Ronald Grant, retired from New York. I'm living in Rocky Mount, and I feel somewhat slighted and ignored and perhaps awkwardly deprived. You all have so much snow there, and all I have is sun. But certainly to be here with you. God bless you.
Happy to have you, sir. And you know, every time I refer to Pastor Grant as my son in the ministry, and he comes on the heels of that and says, I am retired living here in the hills of North Carolina, it makes it both obvious and apparent that I ought not be doing what I'm doing. You know, if my son is already retired, that really says and suggests what I perhaps ought to be doing. Okay, let's come back to the East Coast. But prior to the East Coast, well, actually, I think I'm going to save our doctor for last because she's living in the vicinity where so much activity will be going on as it relates to Jesse Jackson a little later on this week. So let's come back to the East Coast and hear from the pastor of the oldest African American congregation here on Long Island. Good
I am
morning.
delighted to be among such great theologues that I feel a little elementary. Dr. Grant, another bridge is coming. I'm delighted to be on this morning to share with all of you. I'm the pastor of Bethel AME Church. We are 210 years old. Delighted.
Wow, and we are delighted to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Now, right here in central Long Island, I share this geographical region with a tremendous, talented overseer by the name of Regina Carr. Good morning, overseer.
Ooh, that was big. Good morning, everyone.
Say it like
Thanks,
Spurgeon Creighton would have said it.
thanks to my wonderful friend, Dr. Bishop Stephanie Stratford. I am stranded in North Carolina this morning,
Uh,
and I bring you greetings from the Christian Uprise through Edification Discipleship Ministry. We cannot get a flight out of here until Thursday morning.
oh, ooh,
Yeah.
I am not excited about hearing that. But I have a granddaughter who's playing in the state championship of North Carolina. And if they win tonight, their championship game is Friday. So I'm planning, assuming that they win tonight, to try and get to North Carolina. It sounds like that might be a bit of
If
a
you can get
task.
if you can get out of New York, you're okay. Our
That would be
flight
great.
from right,
That
our
would,
flight from Charlotte to North Carolina was canceled, and they're all booked up until Thursday morning to try to get into New York.
but that is assuming that I was in New York. But I won't go down that rabbit hole. Okay.
Okay. All right. See? Okay.
Dr. Stratford said, did I get everybody? Did we hear from oh yeah, did we hear from
Got
Buffalo?
it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. Dr. Stratford,
Yes, sir.
would you
Oh,
say hello to us?
I'm sorry. The reason why, hi, I'm Dr. Stephanie Stratford, lead servant of Ecclesia International in the Washington metropolitan area of Gambrills, Maryland, and we got no snow.
Okay. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, beloved, I am Andy C. Lewter of the Hollywood Full Gospel Baptist Cathedral of Amityville, New York, and the Queen's Ministry of New York City. And we are delighted to be here with you today. As I'm sure you've been able to detect from our conversation, there is a blanket of snow that has covered the Northeast, and we're struggling to recuperate, recover, and dig our way out of what I understand has been the most massive blizzard that we have had in the last 10 years. Actually, this year, 2026, has been the worst winter that I have experienced since 1978. I have a t-shirt that says, I survived the blizzard of 1978. I have not seen repeated snowstorms like we have seen this year in many years. And so we're hopeful that this is the last of the snow that we will see, and that March will live up to its reputation of coming in like a lion and going out like a lamb. I want to thank, in his absence, Pastor Norman Scott, who led our discussion on last week, which was in the immediate aftermath and wake of the death of Jesse Louis Jackson. I could not remain on the call for the entirety of the call, but I'm grateful for those of you who carried the torch and continued the conversation, even in my own absence. Well, this week, there have been a number of tributes and memorials scheduled to reflect upon the life of Jesse Jackson. They will take place in South Carolina. They'll take place in the Washington, D.C. area. They will start, from what I understand, in Chicago. And of course, there's a bit of a controversy in the Washington, D.C. area, because there was an effort to repose the body of Jesse Jackson in the Capitol that has been refused by the Republican-led lawmakers of Washington, D.C. Perhaps we'll touch upon that for just a moment or two. But it appeared to me that this would be a perfect opportunity to examine a new book that I'm working on that I hope will be available by the end of the spring, which examines and compares the difference between the preacher politician and the preacher social activist. To the credit of the Black church, we as an institution have produced both typologies here in America. We can look at preacher politicians going all the way back to the aftermath of the Civil War, the beginning of Reconstruction, individuals like Reverend E. Ransom, and who was a member of the AME tradition. More recently, Floyd Flake, again, a member of the AME tradition. We as an institution, meaning the Black Church, we have produced several preachers who have gone into politics and have distinguished themselves in that regard. On the other hand, we've had preacher activists, Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, and Jesse Jackson seems to be a hybrid or a combination of those two polemics in the Black church. He certainly started out with Martin Luther King as a social activist, Operation Push, and his Rainbow Coalition evolved into a political movement. And while he did not secure a position as an elected official, he ran twice for the presidency of the United States. And for those of you who know politics, and you know the background of politics in the 1980s, it was Jesse Jackson who literally changed the landscape of the electoral process. It used to be that whoever won the primary, it was a winner take all system, which meant that if you won a state, regardless of how many votes your competitors got, you got all of the delegates from that state. It was Jesse Jackson who introduced and pushed for proportional delegates, which meant that even though you lost the state, you were awarded the number of delegates that represented the proportion of votes that you got in that state. And of course, it was this system of proportional delegates that helped Barack Obama, once he secured a lead, to maintain that lead throughout the remainder of the primary system. If they had been using the old system, Hillary Clinton would have been able to overtake him in the latter third of that Democratic primary race. But because it was proportional, he was able to get enough votes in the states that he lost to maintain the lead and secure the nomination for the Democratic Party, and then, of course, go on to win his election 2 times as president of the United States. So it was Jesse Jackson, his forward thinking, his insight that made it possible for us to have a Black president here in the United States. And so I am sure that that's one of the several items that will be discussed and talked about over the next several days as we remember and reflect upon the life of Jesse Louis Jackson. I want to open the microphone, and because so much activity is going to be going on in Washington, D.C., I want to start with Dr. Stratford, South Carolina, Chicago, and then, of course, the crescendo in Washington, D.C. And I'm anxious to hear from you, Dr. Stratford. What is the attitude? What is the conversation? What is the thinking of people in and around the Washington, D.C. area since the Republican-led Congress has chosen not to award the honor of being reposed in the rotunda to Jesse Jackson? Now, I'm sure many of you have already heard, that Kirk, I forget the gentleman's name, but there have been 2 other known individuals that were not awarded this honor as well. And of course, what little that I have read from Speaker Johnson says he is holding to the precedent of the rules that have been recently passed in Washington, D.C. and in Congress that only allows presidential figures and former members of Congress to be awarded this honor. Dr. Stratford, what are you hearing in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I haven't heard much chatter because I've been preoccupied with something else. And that's why Overseer is stuck in North Carolina. She went with me on a mission trip to Belize. And unfortunately, because of the weather in your region, she wasn't able to get back. So sorry, sis. But the undercurrent, the very little bit that I have heard from as far as people's responses is, of course, from our community. We expect it because of his contributions to not just us, but to our area and to society in general. His boldness and his work has been outstanding, and we feel, those that have spoken with, that he should be honored and recognized. I don't know in terms of whether it's being considered racial, and she clears her throat, or whether with the mention of policy, it's being accepted that we go with what has been established. So, sorry, sir.
Great. Pastor Grant, let me come to you from your view and perspective. As a retired cleric, one of the items that we all have faced at various moments in our careers is, what is it that our communities, our neighborhoods, but more specifically our congregations, what is it that our congregations need? We have always known that the position and the posture and the stance of pastor is to be an advocate for our people, but we have often found ourselves at a crossroad. Do we pursue political office, or do we remain outside the secular city and speak truth to power from an external position? The reason I'm coming to you, Pastor Grant, I think many on the panel are not aware that not only are you a churchman of the first magnitude, having served as not only pastor in Tarrytown and in Hudson, New York, but to go on to be the moderator of the Central Hudson Baptist Association in mid-state New York, and then from there to go on and become the president of the Empire Baptist Missionary Convention. So you have stood in that office of churchman and advocate for the Black church from outside the political office, but you have also been elected or appointed to serve as the commissioner of police in the town wherein you've pastored. And you annually do the commencement address or commencement remarks and prayer for the state troopers of New York. So you have experience in both of these arenas, both the political arena and the social activist arena, as well as the church arena. Talk to us about what you see and feel is this divided road, this choice that we have to make as to whether or not we're going to be political or whether or not we're going to settle for being social activists.
Well, thank you, Bishop, for throwing me into this. And you've given much of what needs to be said in terms of the various roles. I would dare say one size does not fit all. We have pastor, preacher, then you might have politician, but then you have certain categories that one's gift makes room for, if you will. Okay, and you find that many of the pastors of the past and present who are involved in the political arena did so because they spoke out from the pulpit. And they had a voice and they had a fellowship. Now we have an arena every Sunday, pastors do, to say what we have to. Now, some of the mindset of people, then that depends again on your region, because some people say, well, no, religion and politics ought not mix. Well, that's an argument in itself, because anything that affects God's people, God's leaders ought to certainly be an advocate for or against. And you look even in the Bible, nearby making his journey, one might call that one of the first urban renewal programs. You know, when Jesus took the little boy's lunchbox and opened up his own deli in the desert. Operation Bedbasket. I mean, you have so many different things that one could look at as part of what we do in our various calls. But I believe that, and the scripture tells us, what God gives in terms of gifts. Unto some he gave apostles, preachers, pastors. Well, he gives gifts to people, and sometimes your gifts will certainly make room for you, because if you go out and do God's bidding, sometimes he'll elevate you into another arena. Now, politicians has their particular role, and then one has to be careful because there are different rules, like different games, basketball, football, and politics. So we have to be careful how we navigate, because we could be out there and sometimes go against the very grain or the very principle that we subscribe to. But I believe that our role as leaders ought to be to utilize, to exhaust every available resource to help the folk whom God has placed in our charge. Now, to run for office, sometimes that is applicable in that particular situation. We have something going on right now here in Rocky Mount, where a couple of pastors have stepped out, and they did so out of protest of not being heard from those legislators that they put in. Now, I believe also in concluding that we are responsible for who we subscribe or endorse or vote for in terms of our lawmakers, who would then go out there and make up the laws of the land, which might be against the will of God. Well, we did that sometimes. We need to check them out also. And sometimes, instead, if you don't find it within the group that you have, then you might have to call on one of your own. You need to go out there. And so, that happens that way too.
Wow, wow, wow. Uh, Let me come to Pastor Hayward. Pastor Hayward, is it accidental, as I listed the various personalities that have served our communities over the years, and I talked about preacher politicians. I went all the way back to the Reconstruction era and Reverend E. Ransom, more recently, Floyd Flake. Is it by accident that both of these individuals are products of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, or is there something in the DNA? Is there something in what you were taught, how you are mentored, that make you more available for this kind of service to community and congregation? When I think of the tragic loss of the pastor in Charleston, South Carolina, he too was a part of that whole genre of politician preacher. Talk to us about the uniqueness of the AME Church and why it appears that they have produced more persons in this genre, in this category of preacher politician, than perhaps some of the other denominations that are represented here on here on our panel today.
Thank you, Bishop. It's in our DNA in the AME Church. Our founder, Richard Allen, was an advocate for justice with the racial attitude of the Focusing George Church that caused Allen and his followers to leave that church and go and start Mother Bethel Church 6 blocks away from where the racial incident took place. Reverend Garrett, phenomenal part of our historical makeup. He had Floyd Flake and a number of others. Reverend Pinckney in South Carolina, who was gunned down during a Bible study by a young white boy who had some racial contributes in his head that thought he'll start a race war. But the opposite, and as a matter of fact, Barack Obama, the president, eulogized Reverend Pinckney to about audience of about 4,000 people who attended that funeral, which now caused the Confederate flag to be removed from the Capitol in South Carolina. Going back to Reverend Garrett, what's interesting about him that his stepfather forced him into church. His mother was a Native American. His stepfather was an African American. He was introduced to the AME Church in 1865 in Washington, Ohio. What's interesting is, even in Ohio, in the state of Ohio today, at Wilberforce University, where I did my undergrad work, there's a library in his honor at Wilberforce University and Payne Theological Seminary. His cause in fighting injustice is not by accident, it's really by force. He pastored a few churches in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Charles Street AME Church in Boston, the strongest AME church in that region, and led the congregation to economic stability, stood for civil rights, which I believe he passed the torch on to a few others, Daniel Payne, Henry McNeil Turner, two of our founding bishops who were quite radical. Matter of fact, Turner ordained the first female preacher in our denomination that caused just a ruckus, and they rescinded her ordination. But in the late 1998, I believe it was, her ordination was reinstated, and we found her grave. And she's been honored since which. But Floyd Flake comes to New York, assigned to Allen Cathedral. He was working in corporate America and came to New York at the age of 37 and decided to take Allen Church through an economic renaissance. To this day, Allen Cathedral is the second largest employer in Queens behind Kennedy Airport. His run for Congress came with much opposition because so many people thought that the preacher should not be a politician. But he has such a fire in his belly and such determination to do things that's going to better the Queens area, and especially Jamaica Queens area, that to this day, Allen Cathedral owns at least 10 high-rise buildings. 7 of them are apartment complexes. They have a second sanctuary. They own the bus company. The firehouse is being used right now on Merrick Avenue. Was owned by the city. They bought the firehouse. Now they rent the firehouse to the city. Mm-hmm. They went on to develop a school for Black boys. And once that school was put in place, the church grew so rapidly they had to build a new facility. His quest for justice and for economic development in an impoverished community has turned that community around. To this day, that stretch of a highway, about 8 blocks, is now called the Floyd Flake Boulevard because of his efforts and what he was determined to do. He's taught his members, before you buy a car, buy a house. Taught his members, go to school, get educated, better yourself. He empowered his congregation to develop their own credit union. To this day, when I met him, we sat and talked, and I asked him, what is the income of your church? $17 million. $100,000 on a Sunday was a bad Sunday. Now, can you imagine a church that hires 2 CPAs full-time, a chef full-time, office staff of about 10 people, bookstore? His quest was for the betterment of our people in how we look at life and how we look at economic stability. One of his efforts was, how do we change the genre of our people generationally when it comes to public housing? And decided that the church would build their own housing. And then on top of that, build another village, which housed about 15 houses in a cul-de-sac. His son took up the mantle and also started a restaurant across the street from the church. So there's a whole block in front of the church that the church owns because of injustice, because of what he saw that we needed to do. Now, I believe the pastor ought to get involved politically. I'm a firm believer. And Bishop, let me remind you of something. The young ladies in Darfur that were being brutalized and the government wasn't saying anything. You took the mantle and had us at the train station. I'll never forget that. When the town was listening to us, you took 200 of us to the town hall steps and had a get the vote out rally. So I believe if you were to put your head in the ring, you won't just be Bishop Lewter. I think you'd be one of our politicians. Before I came to New York, the borough I live in is only about 12 square blocks. And I was being considered to run for mayor in my own borough. But I was sent here to New York. And I get involved politically in our arena here. I think the pastor ought to know what's going on in the school board. I think the pastor ought to have a say in the school board's budget. I believe the pastor ought to have a say in the streets department and what's being done. I believe that African Americans should have a seat at the table. I'm so glad to say this, that before my arrival, Bishop Lewter did such a wonderful job. His father changed the genre of a block in our community that was infested with drug activity, and decided on a Sunday morning after church to take the congregation to that same corner to stop the flow of drugs into our neighborhood. He and a pastor Burgess together, two pastors, caused a blighted block infiltrated with activities of drugs and ill repute. Those two pastors decided enough's enough. And I believe if they would have run for political office, they would have been elected today. So I just believe, Dr. Grant and Dr. Stratford, that we ought to be involved so much that when anything happens, they ought to come to the house of God first and find out what's going on. So kudos to Bishop Lewter, even though he's not speaking of this, but I think he should have been a politician. He has the voice. He has the pulse of our community. And when I arrived, I was first told, go find Bishop Lewter, because the man that you need to speak with and connect with was nobody but Bishop NEC Lewter. And and kudos to what he's done. That even today, AA is at Hollywood, bringing folks back to wholeness. And I love that, because that says a whole lot. He has one of the largest food pantries in our community. That's because he has his boots on the ground and his ear to the needs of the people.
Ooh.
Amen.
Thank you for that, Pastor.
Amen.
Ladies, we're going to come to you, but just prior to that, I want to jump up to Buffalo, because in Buffalo is another shining example of preacher politician, preacher social activist in the person of Darius Pridgeon, who I'm not sure if he still serves as the president of the city council for the city of Buffalo, but Bishop Jeffrey Bowens can give us a much better picture of this whole conversation that we're having about preacher politician versus preacher social activist as it relates to the city of Buffalo. Bishop Bowens?
Yes, I'm here. God bless. I'm just absorbing. I appreciate the comments that has already been given on this subject matter about politicians and activists and preachers. So it's an interesting dynamic that goes on there, because when you call to be a preacher or a minister of the gospel, you are supposed to meet the needs of the people. You ought to preach the gospel. And those were some of the things that had isolated a lot of preachers in their quest, in their calling. Call to be a politician is a whole different idea and subject. I like what Pastor Haywood said, that Floyd Flake had something burning on the inside of him. And I think that is the key to making that transition and causing that to intersect. Yes, Bishop Pridgeon he's no longer in that position of president of the council here in Buffalo, New York, but he still has a very radical ministry and a radical voice. I don't know if that happens automatically. I don't know if it's a design of God, but it seems those who take that step and step out into that water seems to cause their ministries to explode. It seems to cause recognition to come to them. Governor Holcomb, when she comes to Buffalo, she comes to True Bethel Baptist Church. And so I think that there are some benefits, and there are some, perhaps, as Dr. Grant says, there's some detriments that also comes along with those two things intersecting and converging. But I think that I have to go biblical, and I have to look at the call of Joseph with his brothers. And one of the things that occurred with that is that the Lord had given him a vision that he would be over his family and over the people of Israel. And he rose to being second in command in Egypt. And so we do need both. And as we look at Reverend Jeremiah Wright as he preached, and Barack Obama sat at his feet and came up with the notion to run for the president of the United States after being senator. So God used it, I see, in diverse ways of moving his people to the place they need to be. Um, like Dr. Haywood, I believe he has the capacity, the capability to be a politician easily because of his intellectual ability, because of his recall, because of his understanding, because of his depth of knowledge. Some people just have it. I wondered if I would ever have it. I can be an activist, but a politician, you can pass the buck to somebody else.
Ladies, we're coming to you, and you bring both a feminist and a womanist perspective to this conversation. And I would imagine that when it comes to what we're talking about, Overseer Carr, Overseer Seaman, Bishop Singster, do you see this topic through the same lens as those of us who have spoken thus far? Again, you possess the perspective of what we call womanist theology, what we also call feminist theology. And so I'm anxious to hear your perspective on what we're talking about, because for you, it is not singular. There are at least two dual perspectives that you wrestle with as you engage in this conversation today. And I'll let you go in whatever order you're comfortable with, whether that's Overseer Seaman, Overseer Carr, or Bishop Singster, however you want to come at this. Well, somebody say something. All right, Overseer
Okay.
Carr. Overseer Carr, we'll start with you since you all are being so polite and humble today. Let me force the issue. Come on, Overseer Carr.
I was trying to give way to my sisters. I have my original thoughts that connect with what Pastor Haywood said, because I was a witness to what your father, Daddy Lewter, my pastor, Reverend Dr. Spurgeon E. Creighton, and Overseer, oh Lord, I can't call his name. What's his name?
Burgess.
Burgess, yes. I was there. We walked from Holy Trinity down to Albany Avenue and Great Neck Road to stand against the drug activity that took place on the corner, and as well as my father's house is almost literally around the corner from that. And so that is an obvious experience of pastors taking the forefront as leaders in the community to make a change. My initial response to this conversation goes back to the Bible, where Jesus said, I must needs go to Samaria, and he was going to Samaria because of the political conflict that was going on there, as well as the historical conflict that was going on there. And he went there to break barriers. And I believe we as preachers, as leaders, are activists in our own right. And that leads me to my second point is we have to be offering a countercultural consciousness to the people of God. And I say countercultural because we cannot always be blinded by what the mainstream culture is saying and doing. We have to offer a counterculture experience where, through the Word of God, as Pastor Hayward has said, what Dr. Floyd Flake did, because I also witnessed those things that he did in the Queens community, being born in New York City. So we have to be activists in our own right. As Bishop Bowen said, do I want to become a politician? Absolutely not. However, there's a fight that we must fight, but our weapons are not carnal. They're mighty in God for the pulling down of the stronghold. So, there's a need that we have to respond to. Injustices are happening all around us. And then when you bring in the female part of it, we've been all my life I had to fight. Come on, somebody. So the fight is, and then also what I heard a lot is something that's within you that rises up to provoke you into the fight. You're not going to just wake up one morning and say, I want to become a politician. You're going to wake up to a fire that's going off on the inside of you that you cannot put out. And that's what pushes you into the ring. That's what pushed Jesse Jackson. That's what pushed Dr. Martin Luther King. That's what my sentiment here today is somebody else has to have a dream. Somebody else has to have a push. Somebody else has to have a desire to make a change in our circles. And it cannot be self centered or self gratification that makes it happen. It has to come
Mhm.
from a burning desire to see justices prevail in our lives. And as far as us as women, you know, um, again, we fight in the home, we fight in the church, we fight in the community, we fight in the school because we're the ones going back and forth to the school districts, with our children. So we're already fighting, whether we're recognized for the fighters not or not. Just like we go back to your original statement about denying Reverend Jesse Jackson to stand in state, you know, we make things happen in our own right, in our own backyards. We make things happen, and that's how stuff comes to life. They may not let us in the White House, but we have to make it happen regardless of the locale. Once it starts to happen, then it becomes public knowledge, then it becomes a norm.
Wow, great, great. Overseer Seaman.
Yes, sir. I am at a disadvantage in many ways. Um, Beliefs, I have many. I agree with everything everybody said, and Floyd Flake was amazing to me. And I am a firm believer that Jesus was the best politician ever. He did what he did because he believed in it. As Overseer Carr said, you have to have a push, you have to have a belief, you have to have more than that, an understanding. You can't just have a knowledge of what's going on. You have to have a core understanding of what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it. And move forward through there. You can't do it alone. When people try to do things alone, we fail. We need to have someone behind us, some people behind us. We need to have a raison d'etre. We have to have that reason to be and reason to be the best that we can be. Politics, I've never really been into. I believe I was well into my 30s because it disgusted me so. People were just so crooked and so loudmouth and so underhanded, and it turned me off. It absolutely turned me off. As you get older, you learn to fight even the more. At that point, you're fighting for me to breathe in the society, to raise my children, my grandchildren, to get the best I can for the people that I serve, for the people that I connect with. We have to understand basic politics and stand behind. If you don't want to be on the front lines, and I don't, if you don't want to be in that front line, you have to be able to at least to stand behind and push. And I am. And I pray that a lot of people are willing to take that stand. As far as it being a strictly religious issue, we need to sometimes, I have to go back to when people get to God, when they understand that they want Jesus in their life. What do we give them after they say, I want to be in the church? I want to be a member of the church. What do we offer them after offering them Jesus? When they come with issues that are political, food, clothing, housing, insurance, death, What do we do? What do we give them? What are we able to give them as preachers of the gospel? That in season and out of season, we say it very lightly, in season and out of season, but nobody really wants to go to the accountability and the costs of the out of season. And that's where we have to go. If we're not willing to go the mile, why get in the race? And if you're in the race and you know you can't go the mile, if you just can't breathe that hard, do what you can. Don't drop out. We need to learn to stand behind the things that work. As women, as preachers, I don't believe that being a pastor or any level of ministry stops you from being in a certain level of political belief and arenas. And if that's what God has placed you in, and if that's what God is doing in your life, then you need to do it. I, being me, have no problem talking about political issues in my own way in the church. We have to, because people come to us and we somehow become the bottom line. That's not fair to them and it's not fair to us. There are too many diversities in thought for that to become the bottom line. So we have to reach out and do more than we're doing. And prayerfully, we are going to be doing that in this year. When it comes to Jesse Jackson in the rotunda, does he deserve to be there? Yes. But I thought about the conversation that we were having. And if we don't break certain protocol, we're not going to move forward for those who are deserving. On the other hand, if what is right is protocol, and that has been the allowance over centuries, then at least let us find a groundbreaking rule other than everything he stood for, which is magnificent, to break it and break it in the right way. Sometimes I think we become bulls in a pulpit and in a pen, and we want to run forth and break things. And that's not what we need to do. We need to do it in a good administrative way. And I think we'll be okay.
Bishop Singster, wrap this up for us, and then I'm going to just touch on a topic we probably won't have time to discuss it fully or even comprehensively. We might have to pick it up next week, but give us your perspective.
Okay. I think as women, it comes natural with us. What we do in the pulpit and what we do at home, or everything else that comes natural. I am not a feminist. I'm a womanist theology. I come under Dolores Williams and some of those ones that believe that we have a social justice ministry. And so we have that in layers, There should be someone that is at the courthouse, and there should be someone at the jail. There should be someone on each aspect of our ministry. And I agree with what Dr. Lewter did, is that's beautiful. That's my ministry. Feeding, making people comfortable in all aspects of life, make them uncomfortable, be an agitator like Douglas and some of the other people that we know. I have a minister of social justice, David Goodson, and he does not mind being an agitator. And matter of fact, this Sunday he's going to be preaching. But I do think that women have a different view on the ministry of social justice. And we take a different take on that. I believe in having a ministry like Keith Haywood was talking about. We teach our people to educate themselves, to get in the literacy part and all those parts. I think that our ministry is always a social justice ministry with what can't say what most of people enjoy. I think we have the freedom of doing that in the Black church and speaking out to all of those things.
Great. Listen, we have about 3 to 4 minutes that's left, and I just want to kind of touch on this. And again, we may not have opportunity to discuss it fully, thoroughly. Perhaps next week we'll come back and take a look at it again. But the youngest child of Jesse Jackson, Ashley Jackson, born in 1993, is the result of an outside relationship that Jesse Jackson had following his 1988 bid for the White House. There have been a very subtle and faint effort on the part of some, and I don't mind identifying white evangelicals who are attempting to besmirch and undermine the long-term contribution of Jesse Jackson with this, perhaps what we would call a misjudgment later on in life. And so my question in these last few minutes, and anybody can jump on this, and again, we may need to pick it up next week. Should a faulty or misjudgment later on in life erase and or overshadow the major contributions that you've made over the course of your career? Should just putting it out there, the last child of Jesse Jackson somehow demur and shadow the vast contributions that he has made over the course of his life? Who wants to jump in on this?
If I may, because I was waiting for that to come up.
I know you were.
But no one is talking about the 19 people he flew out of this country into foreign land to secure their freedom. Like, only one person came back to him and said, thank you, out of the 19. So I'm not surprised that some clear people would try to mar his character because of the youngest child. I've learned this one thing. When mama and daddy was creeping, God didn't make no mistake. Even though the behavior may have been awkward, but God never makes a mistake in the birth of a child. But the 19 people he rescued, when the country didn't go to get them, no one's mentioned a thing about that.
I say if we're going to start judging on people, then all of us need to get shut down, including the clear people, because what they did to our country is, let's start here. President Trump is trying to get rid of the immigrants who he says are criminals. He's a criminal. So what are we doing? So I Bishop, I really think this is a next week conversation. But what are we doing?
Anybody else? We've got our 2 minutes.
I wanted to hear from Overseer Carr, but I want to say that I had the privilege of going to Israel, and the flag honoring King David is still flying.
Wow.
I see both sides of it. I also hear not being judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character.
And I hear, for all have sinned
And fall short.
The glory of God.
Absolutely. And who's the judge? I think was it one of you that said, you have to be in the room when the pie is being cut. Somebody said that somewhere.
I said that last week.
Dr. Grant.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm studying repeating that because you not only do you have to be in the room when the pie is being cut, you got to recognize who's cutting the pie.
That's good.
Let's look at who's trying to make this over arbitrary decision about somebody else's character. What's the pie cutter doing?
Any last comments?
It's going to be a long conversation, Bishop.
I agree.
Nobody
Yeah.
even talked about, you talk about the pie cutter who's in the room with the pie. How do we know what's in the pie? How do we
Right.
know who put the pie together in the first place? I don't eat everybody's cooking. So I don't take everybody's opinion. And I think when we start judging children, God help them if they start judging mine and a lot of other people's I know, or me myself, for whatever happened in my life, or my parents' life, or my grandparents' life.
What
But the
I think
Bible,
is, yeah, what
no,
I
go
think
ahead.
is, unfortunately,
1985,
yeah,
TWA plane was hijacked with 153 hostages on that
I
aircraft.
remember that. Yeah.
Jesse Jackson freed those people.
Yeah.
mhm.
So I'm sure some
And
of them on the plane are trying to throw stones themselves right now. But
Yeah.
Mama said, "You have sinned, not sinned, cast the first stone."
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
and I do think it is unfortunate, and we have to recognize this, that since 1993, there has the light and the shine on Jesse Jackson's life took a hit in 93. And I think we all can kind of look back and have to confess that things were not the same after that. And I think that is perhaps as much an indictment on us as it is on other people who were trying to use that to wrestle from him his influence, his respect, and his standing in the Black community.
There is also the art of forgiveness, and I think we all fail in that subject. There's an art of forgiveness. We want to forgive some people some of the time, and then there's some people we don't want to forgive at all. You
Mm,
know, and we have to recognize that God looks on the just and the unjust. And we can't be so caught up with ourselves in deciding who should be forgiven and who shouldn't, or who
Thank
should
you.
do this and who should not do that. Snap out of it. God is, like all of us are sinners, all of us are blood dirty, and God has forgiven us, cleansed us from all unrighteousness, shook us off, snapped us, and brought. Watch this. Can these dry bones live? And
wow.
that's what we're talking about, dry bones. Can these dry bones live? And all he said was blow on them. Come on. That's all he said. Blow on them. And
Right.
so if God can forgive, why can't we?
Not
Well,
only
listen,
that, but why can't we forgive? Why do we have to take our time? Not this year, but next year, not today, but tomorrow. It's got
That's
to
still
end.
unforgive. That's unforgiveness. That's
I know it. Yeah,
unforgiveness.
I know that. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Hmm.
well, listen, friends, for the last hour, you've been watching and listening to the Weekly Literature Roundtable. Let me thank all of our panelists and guests who have shared in today's conversation. Until next time, go in peace, go in love, go in joy, and go in happiness. For the author of the same most certainly goes with you.